At some point in your spiritual journey, perhaps after a powerful insight or a deep emotional rupture, you felt something shift. It wasn't just a new idea or belief. It was as if the veil covering reality had been torn open right in front of your eyes. Suddenly, everything that once felt urgent, success, validation, goals, lost its glow. You saw the patterns, the illusion, the noise. And at the center of it all, silence. A silence that felt almost sacred. At first, it was liberating. It felt like you had finally come home to yourself. But as the days went by, that silence began to take on a strange tone. The meaning behind things started to evaporate, not dramatically, but subtly. As if your soul had turned down the volume of life, and simply forgot to turn it back up. You stopped chasing. You stopped caring. But not in a destructive or reckless way. It was more like that long, existential sigh that comes after seeing a truth no one prepared you for. And then, the question starts echoing, louder and louder, even if no one else can hear it. Why do I feel so empty now that I finally saw the truth? This is where the paradox is born. Because everything we've been told about spiritual awakening is that it brings light, direction, and purpose. But for many of us, the empaths, the deep thinkers, the silent seekers, it does the exact opposite. It empties us. Not because we're lost, but because we finally stopped lying to ourselves. I remember a friend, deeply spiritual. She read Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti. She went on retreats. She meditated. She was aware of every little detail. And then, after a long dark night of the soul, she awakened. She said she saw through the illusion of ego, of external success, of the need to become someone. For 2 weeks, she radiated light. And then, she collapsed. She spent hours staring at the ceiling. Couldn't get out of bed. She told me, I used to cry for not doing enough. Now I don't care if I do anything at all. I thought awakening would light me up, but it turned me off. Carl Jung knew this. Even though he didn't use the language of modern spiritual circles, he understood what happens when the unconscious becomes conscious. Jung wrote, "Enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." It sounds beautiful, until you actually live it. Because awakening is not the happy ending. It's the beginning of death. The psychological death of the character you thought you were. The pillars that held up your sense of self, career, relationships, goals, identity, collapse. But here's the crucial point, the ego doesn't die. It gets lost. It loses the map. And without a map, motivation disappears. You're not depressed. You're in transition. You've awakened from something, but haven't yet awakened into something else. You're caught between worlds. And that's not a failure. It's not regression. It's part of the process. Jung warned that our modern culture fears this space, the sacred void, the in-between, the pause between the old and the new. But this is exactly where the true self is born. Most people don't know how to name this stage. So they label it as laziness, procrastination, lack of drive. And that guilt only deepens the fog. But Jung saw this as an essential phase of individuation, the path that transforms us from a fragmented ego into a unified soul. The problem is, no one prepares you for this part. It doesn't show up on inspirational Instagram quotes. There's no epic soundtrack. It looks like this, you, sitting in silence, unable to explain to anyone what's happening. The world keeps spinning outside, and you feel like you've forgotten what game you were playing. That's why so many get confused. They think they're sick, unmotivated, broken. But they're not. They're being reprogrammed from the inside out. They're becoming someone who doesn't fully exist yet. And that's precisely why you can't follow your old plans anymore. Those goals that once felt sacred, making more money, getting recognition, achieving, now feel hollow. Because they were built by a version of you that no longer exists. And your body knows it. Your mind feels it. You haven't lost your drive. You've outgrown the fuel. According to Jung, the ego is necessary. It builds. It organizes. It helps us interact with the world. But it's not supposed to lead. Leadership belongs to the self, that deep, silent part of you that doesn't care about status, but cares deeply about truth. When the ego starts losing control, it panics. And that's when many people escape. They run from the process. Numb themselves with distractions. Or worse, fall into the trap of spiritual dissociation. They pretend nothing matters. That the world is an illusion. That there's nothing left to do. But that's not transcendence. That's avoidance. The soul doesn't want you to abandon the world. It wants you to live in it differently, with presence, purpose, and depth. But to get there, you have to pass through this weird phase. The limbo. Jung had a name for it, enantiodromia, a psychic phenomenon where things tend to turn into their opposites. From overaction, we fall into stillness. From hyperproductivity, we sink into total disinterest. It's the inner pendulum swinging back. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's necessary. In the language of myth, this is the cocoon stage. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly overnight. First, it becomes soup, a shapeless mass of possibility. No identity. No form. No function. And it's in this stage that the ego screams the loudest. It wants answers. Direction. Identity. But the self whispers, hold on. I'm building something deeper. This is where modern spirituality often fails, because it wants shortcuts. It wants to skip the messy parts. It wants high vibes only. But Jung taught that you can't become whole without going through the shadow. You have to face what was repressed. What was hidden. What was denied. The soul doesn't want perfection. It wants wholeness. And that's why, in this stage, even your life force feels like it's been shut off. Not as punishment, but as a sacred pause. So you can feel. So you can listen. So you can integrate. When your soul senses that you're finally ready to stop running, it begins to release a new kind of energy. It doesn't come like a lightning bolt. It comes like a thread. A whisper. An inner gesture. A quiet yes. This new drive isn't fueled by fear. It's not performative. It doesn't crave applause. It feels like a memory from the soul. Something you always knew but had forgotten. Jung called this the emergence of the self, not as a pretty concept, but as a real inner compass. A kind of guidance system rooted in the soul, not the ego. And when you begin living from this place, everything changes. The world stays the same, but your participation in it becomes something sacred. You stop forcing. You start responding. You're no longer driven by obligation, but by resonance. External goals still exist, but they no longer own you. You begin to create even when no one's watching. You start saying no to things that don't resonate, even if they look good on paper. You follow your curiosity, not your checklist. And most importantly, you begin to choose peace over performance. That's soul motivation. It's not adrenaline. It's alignment. Of course, this doesn't mean you'll feel 100% inspired all the time. You're still human. Fatigue, doubt, sadness, they all remain. But what disappears is that constant sense of self-betrayal. You stop dragging yourself through a life that no longer fits. And you begin to move from something that pulses from within. Even if no one sees. Even if no one claps. And that's true awakening. It's not about getting back to who you were. It's about discovering who you're still becoming. The old fire had to die so a deeper flame could be born. A flame that doesn't flicker in the wind of criticism or doubt. Carl Jung never promised the path would be easy. But he showed us it would be real. That it would be transformational. And if you've made it this far, if you're still listening, still feeling, then you're already on that path. This isn't the loss of motivation. It's its healing. And if no one's told you that yet, I'm glad you know now. Because this is not the end of your awakening. It's the beginning of your integration. Your authentic expression. Your reconnection with essence. And when that new yes rises inside you, it won't come like fireworks. It will come as a whisper, this way. If this video resonated with you, leave a comment and share what this journey has been teaching you. And if you want to keep diving deep with us into psychology, soul, and transformation, subscribe to Conscious Psyche. Because awakening is not the end of the story. It's where the real story begins.